thoughtful ideas, suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and all the countries and
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Spain. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. Those joining us perhaps for the first time here for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and at 6 p.m., Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, in top of the hour, let me thank you for your thoughtful calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, but particularly your great ideas for topics, guests, and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show here on HCC TV, proudly now in its 32nd season. We have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to talk about issues that it pertains not only to the African-American community, but to the broader community, how those relate to each other, the interdependency, interconnectedness, interdependency, interrelationships, and how we need to look at these things going forward. We're couching it, yes, in the terms as it is Juneteenth, but not so much because it's Juneteenth, just because we need to be having this conversation. And this needs to be a year-round conversation, not just at Juneteenth. We tend to have these conversations around this time of year in the summer, vis-a-vis Juneteenth. We pick the conversations up again in January, starting around the 15th for Martin Luther King's birthday. And from the 15th of January to the end of February for Black History Month, for those 6 weeks, it's everything Black. Black history, Black culture, Black art, Black everything. And then we kind of leave it alone for the rest of the year until Juneteenth rolls around again. We don't want to do that anymore. And I have two guests that are going to help us look at the broader picture, the broader context in which the text that we must be having about injustices, inequities, and all those things that are facing us, not only as African Americans, but as citizens in a democracy, and how we can perhaps navigate together some of these issues. I'm happy to have join me on the first segment is Dr. Patrick Jefferson, who is Executive Director of Education Affairs for Baylor College of Medicine. That's his day job. That's the hat he wears. He wears many other hats in this community, very involved in lots of things, and just so glad to have him join us. So good afternoon and welcome, Patrick.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure and an honor to join you. I was very humbled to get the invitation.
Well, I'm so glad you're able to. Let's just dive in. See, because you do have your finger on the pulse of many things and you're involved in many aspects of this community, education being one of them, but also social change, social awareness, social credibility. How do you see things now in 2023 as we try to go forward and looking at the next few years going down the pipe? Because I personally, and it's probably showing my age, I feel like I'm reliving 1968 all over again. And so I'm trying to figure out if that's true. Okay, what's going to come? What's following this? What's your viewpoint on this?
Well, I think we're in the midst of something. I'm not clairvoyant, but I predicted a few years ago after the murder of George Floyd and all the energy that generated. I think I may have said in a meeting once that we may have been in, a matter of fact, that we need to be careful because, you know, a principle in physics is that for every action, there's equal opposite reaction. And where we were marching and demanding and really putting a spotlight on the shortcomings of the American dream and how all of us have not had opportunities to experience that dream, that there was also going to be a reaction to that. And what we're seeing now is the reaction. We're not having people necessarily out in the streets marching, protesting. They're in school boards, they're in state legislatures, they're in our national legislatures offices, they're in community offices, and they're passing laws, they're putting in ordinances, they're passing all kind of measures to really kind of roll us back. So like you said, not even the 60s, it rolls back to the 40s or 50s. My big concern, because I'm a professional educator, is education and what we're doing to curriculum, what we're doing in schools, starting in the primary grades, going through high school, and now even in higher education. If you look at what's going on in Florida and the attacks on, what you can and can't teach at a university level, and the dialogue around that, around, brainwashing kids and, indoctrinating kids, all this really pointed key language, and they keep repeating it over and over again. And so they're tearing down some of the very structures that can create a more equitable and just society. So that's what I'm seeing going on right now. It's very, very troubling. And those of us on this side who really want the better for our neighbors, to really want to push the equity agenda, to really want to have justice for everyone, we have to be very aware. We have to be very strategic about what our next steps are.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to do to really push back on this, because, from the Supreme Court all the way down, there are things that are being put into law that are very, very troubling and harmful to our community.
Seems like it's a very conscious effort, some ways a very coordinated effort. Seems like it's built on a lot of fear and anger, on that statement about we shall not be replaced, we shall not be removed. It seems to me that we are, because of the demographic shift, this majority-minority reality is beginning to sink into those now who are the minority and will be the minority going forward, that this shift of power potentially could affect them in the privileges that they've had and unrightly deserved all these years. And they're trying to protect that at all costs.
At all costs.
And when we say at all costs, it really is becoming at all costs. They don't care about how they're affecting people's lives, how they're hurting people, how they're endangering people's lives. None of that matters.
That is absolutely true. And, there's always been a segment of the population that will go stand in the corner. I was driving through Houston and overpass at the Nazi flags and, they should not replace us and all that rhetoric. There's always been a segment of that. And, we could point at those people and, okay, those people mean us harm. One of the things that's, I think, even more troubling is the people that don't go and stand on the corners and announce themselves, and this is how we think.
Right.
It's the people that are our neighbors who harbor certain feelings to us and smile and wave at us, but do harmful actions. It's the teachers in our classroom that, Mrs. Mrs. Johnson, that we all know and love, but harbor feelings that may be harmful to our students. The principals, the admissions officers at our colleges and universities. Those people that give out scholarships and who decides who's getting a scholarship, who's not. Those people, I think, are what is most troubling to me. Because there is a sense of we're going to lose our place, we're going to lose our privilege. That fear is drawn by, and like you said, intentionally and very purposely, really kind of pushed on a certain segment of our population and say, hey, you're going to lose a status, you're going to lose a position, you're going to lose privilege. And the undercurrent is if they get in power, they're going to do the same things to us as we did to them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that is really, dangerous. And but it's the reality we're living in. That message has been loud and clear. I think it started really in earnest back, not to get too political, the Tea Party was, and then it kind of, steamrolled to there. So I think now it just gotten so out of control. Even the people that first were instrumental in pushing that movement, they've lost control. It's, it's like Frankenstein, they've created Frankenstein monster. Now the monsters wreaking havoc in the countryside.
What I've observed is this thing towards allyship.
Yes.
And that allyship is only as good until it is tested.
Yes.
And what I've seen is those who have purported to be, as you said earlier, not necessarily always on our side, but that old phrase, I'm not going to do anything to help you, but I'm not going to do anything to hurt you either.
Mm-hmm.
that allyship that we thought we had with certain individuals or groups or organizations, now that it's time to put that to the test, is woefully lacking.
Yes.
And I think that shows that relationship that we thought we had forged, and putting time in that relationship to develop it, to nurture it, to keep it alive, hopefully to yield the results we need, and when we needed them, has not come to our advantage, have not come to our aid.
I think there's this notion of cultural and power scarcity, meaning there's been this story told that there's only so much power to go around. And if we give them some,
Right.
we're going to lose. And the nature of us as human beings is, we fight to hold on to our little piece of the pie, whatever we have. And this artificial notion of scarcity is driving that. We live in the richest, most powerful country in the history of mankind. This notion that there is not enough to go around is just fallacy. And you know it, and I know it. It's false. And we know all the numbers. If you look at the defense budget and how much they spend on jet fighters, and it's been all kind of comparisons. And if you take this percentage, you can remodel every elementary,
Right.
middle school, and high school in America if you take just this portion of the defense budget, things like that. So there's not scarcity. It's just a matter of where we want to put our priorities. But again, it's been a very deliberate message, purposeful message. And if you hear the words, you hear the same thing over and over and over again. They get a message and they stay on that message. Most of it is flat out lies,
Right.
just untrue. But they stay on that message. For example, the critical race theory thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have people showing up at school board meetings for elementary districts, middle schools, high schools, demanding that CRT is not taught in their district. They're passing board resolutions to stop CRT in their district. None of the teachers in any of the schools even know what CRT is.
Exactly.
They'll never do it. They never taught it. It's not even a thing. But they've kind of had this message they pounded over and over again. And they're starting to take things out of textbooks. They're trying to, as they always have, but trying to rewrite things, and really we just won't teach things, but we're going to punish teachers for even bringing up the topic. We're going to make sure that we not just don't teach it, we're going to change the story and change the narrative and things like that. So very, very dangerous things going on. And it has me very worried because, again, I go back to what is going to be our response? As good, justice-minded, kind-hearted people, what can we do? How can we come together and have a powerful, coordinated response? Because that's what it's going to take. We can't sit and just hold hands with each other and say things are going to be okay. We have to be active and figure out what we're going to do to combat this.
Right. A kumbaya moment is not what we need at this point. The question then, as you pose it so well, why the silence of those who need to be speaking out and speaking up is deafening. We don't have that voice or voices on the other side to counter the narrative and to counter the 24/7 messaging that is being delivered to the other quote unquote, the other side.
Yes.
And what I am always not so much amazed at, because I'm too old to be amazed about certain things, is that our leadership, quote unquote, again, leadership, has not seemed to be able to rise to the occasion and to create and develop a sustained narrative to counter, or at least to be able to point out the fallacies of the untruths that are being said, and do it in a way that is not necessarily attacking, but just truly truthful and verifiable.
Yeah.
We don't seem to be able to put that kind of movement together.
So it's a few things to go with that. Number one, those of us who seek justice, who seek truth, who seek equity, who seek the betterment, the better situation for our neighbors. We're hamstrung by a few things. Number one is that we're honest. We tend to want to tell the truth. And so it's easy to go out and spread a message full of lies you have no accountability for. Say what you want to say.
Right.
We live by ethics and a moral code. And so we don't want to do harm to other people. And some other people don't do that. They'll say anything and do anything, even though it causes harm. And so we are immediately at a disadvantage when it comes to that. Because if you have no ethics, no morals, and you're willing to say anything, you don't have to play in any lane. You can drive in any lane you want to, because we have those things and we live by those principles. We have to stay in a certain lane. So that kind of hamstrings us there. But I think going back to your question about leadership, I think number one, there are so many issues and challenges in our society that we want to address. So sometimes I think it's hard for us to stay on message because we're kind-hearted people. We want to help, and we have to focus and prioritize where we put our time and energy. So I think that's a challenge for us. Number two, we're comfortable. We have our middle-class homes, our good educations, many of us. And I heard Mayor Turner, say, everybody goes to the lands, Pearland, Woodland, Sugarland, and we go to work, we come home, and we retire to the lands. And many times, to really be a agent of justice, you have to be willing to risk something. And, that's a personal decision, how much you're willing to risk is, we have comfortable lives now, and that's an indictment of myself as well. We look at, how am I going to make a living? How am I going to, keep my job, that kind of things like that. And so we have to have a conversation about what our priorities are and how much we're willing to risk. Not everybody is willing to risk the same thing, and that's okay. That is perfectly okay. But depending on where you are you willing to do everything you can up to that line?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to be out marching, that's fine. Can you organize? Can you make phone calls? Are you good at strategizing?
Right.
Do you understand finance? So you can understand how to finance a movement. So if we start getting donations, you know how to make sure that stays legal and the banking part is done. Are you good at graphic design? So you can do, a website for us. What is your skill set that you can bring that is within your comfort zone that you can employ on behalf of bringing justice for others?
All that you said is very true, but I still think that the change we seek is deeply rooted in a moral, ethical question. And we as a people going back through slavery and to all the songs and the spirituals and the prayers, and understanding what we needed to do just to survive. And after slavery and Jim Crow, et cetera, up to this day, our foundation is, as a people, is really a moral, ethical foundation.
True.
We know what is right. We know what is wrong. We know what is truth. We understand it probably better, I think, than some. So as a moral, ethical question from a group of people who kind of is part of their DNA, it seems like we should be able to arise and begin to formulate all those things you just talked about, the strategy, the movement, the plan, the pieces of the puzzle, and ask some basic questions. What is the fair, moral, ethical treatment of all human beings? What should that look like? What's just that baseline? What is the fair, ethical, moral treatment of all human beings should look like? Because you can't answer the second two questions that go with that until you answer that one. All human beings are equal. All human beings are equal. All lives are the same. I'm always amazed when I talk to people who are leaders or supposedly leaders, that they understand what they should do. They're hesitant to do it because they don't feel they have anybody behind them. No army, no troops. And I think we have lost that element of being able to depend upon each other. In the old days, I grew up in Orange, Texas with the Klan, literally with the Klan. My protection and my life that was taken or tried to be taken quite a few times by them, even chased home, was always, I could always look over my shoulder and realize that I didn't have to just look over my shoulder anymore because my community, my neighbors, my friends were there to protect me.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a great comfort to know that you're not in this alone. And we don't have that today.
I
We don't
agree.
have people who have each other's back because we're comfortable. We're comfortable.
Yeah, we're comfortable, and it's I think it's been a double-edged sword for us.
Oh, it has been.
Because in many respects, many of us have achieved what our parents, what our grandparents dreamed of.
Right.
I'm a first generation college student. I was able to go from my bachelor degree at Xavier University, very proud HBCU graduate, to get my doctorate at UCLA. I never dreamed I would do that. It's when my parents, my grandparents, both sets dreamed that they would have a grandson, a son to kind of go do that. My son, he grew up very middle class young man. So a lot of the struggles I went through growing up in North Houston in an acres home in Greenspoint, he's never even imagined. He's never saw that. He's never had to see it because I wanted to make sure he didn't have those things. But in that struggle, growing up, you grew up in Orange, Texas. I know right where Orange is, near the border of Louisiana, Texas. I know right where it is.
Before you cross into the promised land.
Before you cross over. That struggle and that, and in many respects, being shaped by that trauma, built in us a certain
it did shape
and come together. It shaped us ability to fight and come together. And so I think in 2023, we got to ask ourselves, living in our comfortable homes, in the lands wherever we live, how do we bring that back, that tenacity, that drive to fight, that willingness to fight, the willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder, back to back with your neighbor, with your family, with your community. When in many respects, the community is really scattered and really comfortable. I think as a community, that's something we have to really kind of have a conversation about. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he talked about raising middle-class Black kids.
Right.
And in many respects, when, we go to family unions, we go to different parts of town, and they're with other Black kids that are not as fortunate as them, they don't have any conversation really. Like they're two different things. How do we still keep that sense of community together? Knowing that, our kids didn't have the trauma and struggles and that trauma and struggle that really brought us together. So I have to leave it at that myself.
Yeah, we have to leave it at that for the moment.
Yes.
Believe it or not, time is out.
Oh man, that was
we'll have to pick this up again. We just were getting good, get going good, Patrick. We'll do that. Thank you. Let me do a quick little closing remark. I guess the question that we're trying to raise, both Patrick and I, and talk about it to get people to begin to think. This question of equity is paramount, and the road to equity is through empathy. And how do you get empathy? You get empathy because you have relationships with other human beings. Relationships built, nurtured, maintained on mutual trust and respect, because nothing happens without trust. I think it's also a question that our grandparents used to ask all of us, what have you done with your life? And the old answer was, I've tried to keep memory alive. I've tried to keep people's understanding of where we've come from as a people. I've tried to fight those who do not want to keep memory alive and remember their history. Because if we forget, we are just as guilty as everyone else who wants us to forget. That old phrase about we learned it along the way, at least I did, and many of my contemporaries, never be silent. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor. It never helps the oppressed. And so the voices that we need, the organized clarity voices that we need to be having this issue and discussion raised right now is probably more important than ever before. We have some, we just don't have enough of them. We have those who are willing to continue to fight and raise the issues every single day. They don't necessarily have the support and backing that they need. This community thing that we've been talking about, this word community, and building community and developing community, and Dr. King's vision of the beloved community, which is not here yet. It may never get here. It may get here, but it's going to take a lot of work in the between to make it happen. And we know that the moral arc of justice bends toward justice, but that's also slow. And I think patience is a thing that many people I talk to are running out of. They've been patient. They've worked. They've put their time in. They've planned. They've strategized. They've met. They've done all those things. But as Patrick said, not only are they not seeing results, they're seeing things taken backwards, moving backwards. So I think it's a pivotal time. You know, that word they always use is inflection point. I think this is one of those times. And I think we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do. When I say we, not just the Black community, those who want to help and understand human beings, because this really is about human beings. It's about treating each other as human beings, regardless of any other label. And so the darkness that keeps us from understanding and recognizing the light that needs to occur, the light has to figure out a way to shine and outdo the darkness. Because right now it seems that darkness is taking over. And you cannot allow that to happen. Because once that happens, to bring back the light is such a hard, arduous task that it may never come back, that spark that you need. So I ask us all to think and reflect on how we can be more engaged. That wonderful little phrase, after a deeper searching of the heart, I now rise to play a greater part. That's where we are. What's your part? What's your role? What's your deeper involvement, commitment, understanding? Thank you again, Patrick, for being with us. Until we come together with you at Dialogue Houston for the next time, as always, be well, be safe, and peace, power, and love.